hosting me. So this talk would be about the security or lack of security of large AI models, and more or less how the curse of dimensionality translates into some aspects of adversarial machine learning. Just yeah, so yeah, one question I got asked when I did this talk last time is this AI security, AI ethics, AI alignment, AI safety, or trustworthy AI? So I happen to have worked across these areas, especially AI alignments since 2016 on the safe interoperability problem and things like that, AI security. The good answer I have is that so far only one of these communities gets fired when correctly doing its job. So I don't know where does this fit. And let's start. So so I will be I think this will be a bit less technical compared to the other the other talks I saw in your seminar. So I will be going back and forth between non-technical and more technical aspects. Don't hesitate to interrupt me, as I said. So besides presenting the technical results, I will discuss also some socio-technical, social motivations behind this research. Also, some aspects of how to motivate this research in use cases that I think needs also to be changed across the community. So I guess you all know this mantra: move fast and break things. It's used, or it is at least it was one of Facebook's mantras, at least during the early years of the company. And we all know now that this move fast and break things mindset gave us more things like move fast and break things, move fast and break lives, move fast and tear society apart. And since February 2022, reasonable people are now talking about World War III, which is something a bit frightening. And yeah, if in 2019 or 18 someone said World War III, we would not take them very seriously. So this is also about this mindset, the move fast and break things that we have across the machine learning community. So yeah, there are some ongoing research to illustrate why this move fast and break things mindset is not necessarily the best thing for us. And so there's this paper from Rosado, Hoogs, and Halberstadt that was published in PLOS ONE. Of course, methodological caveats apply, that discusses the increase of phenomena such as anger, fear, sadness, the decrease of neutrality, and other aspects such as the disgust, and there are many other scientists that are linking this to the increasing importance of social media in our societies. So a lot of my talk will be discussing social media as um, the playground actually of machine learning algorithms. I think our community tends to forget that social media algorithms are today's most consequential deployment of machine learning we have. So instead of move fast and break things, I would more or less advocate for a more Swiss mantra, which is aussi vite que possible, mais aussi lentement que nécessaire. So as fast as possible, but as slowly as necessary. And in the field where I did my PhD, which is distributed computing, this mantra translates into the safety versus liveness trade-off. So that you have in distributed computing. And we know in distributed computing, we have theorems that tell us that you cannot have infinite liveness with infinite safety. And of course, if you want a satisfying level of safety, you have to trade off and decrease the level of liveness you might want to have. Some of the ongoing developments I will present are done with students, Wassim Bouaziz at Polytechnique. And most of my collaborations, the past collaborations especially that are presented in this talk are done with Sébastien Rouault and Nguyen Huang, who are full-time leading the efforts at for AI security solutions. So I'll discuss a bit adversarial machine learning 101. So when you hear this term adversarial machine learning, that's trending thanks to research, some of the research from Mila on adversarial examples, for example. So there are three families of attacks, roughly speaking. There are a bit more, but three bigger coarse-grained categories of attacks. The privacy attack, where an adversary tries to extract information from a model, or like trying to infer other users' data or data that was used to train the model. So those attacks would fall into privacy issues. The evasion attack exploits the imperfections of the trained model, especially after training. So most of the time when you hear adversarial examples, people are talking about evasion attacks. So those are inputs that fool a trained machine learning model. And the third class or family is poisoning attacks. So this talk falls mostly in the third category, where we try, so the adversary, of course, so we try to understand adversaries who are trying to bias, backdoor, influence the model training to harm it, again, like to backdoor it, to bias it, to pull it towards their interests. And it happens mostly at the train phase. So this would be done either by controlling the machines or injecting data points that would be used in the training. And of course, you have misuse, and like misuse is mostly hybrid family that will fall a bit under poisoning, a bit under evasion, sometimes a bit under privacy, or sometimes just reuse published models for harmful purposes. So privacy attacks. So I think this was from. So you all know now. I guess this is an audience that doesn't need this kind of pedagogical example, but it's always good to repeat them. That logs are collected. So here, like for this study, logs are collected from the English-speaking population of Gboard users in the United States. This is from an archive paper by Google, like ex-colleagues at Google, and you know that machine learning models are already using users' data with some caveats on privacy, and we will discuss a bit how the impossibility results we have for poisoning, some of them intersects or have the same, like apply a bit similarly to privacy attacks, especially when the models are very large. So the privacy issues can arise from using your own data on your smartphones or machines, but it also can happen in the worst case possible, where actual employees. So this happened inside Twitter. So that was the 2019 Twitter. So not today's Twitter, which I guess is a bit less safe. So this was in 2019, where Saudi Arabian spies were caught working inside Twitter, and there was a big case reported by the United States Department of Justice, and other similar cases where you can have attackers not only accessing data from smartphones, but actually having access to the servers that will be training the model, or something like that. Evasion attacks. So as I said, those are like what most people call adversarial examples. Evasion attacks, when you have a trained model and you want to fool it. So obviously, if you have an AI learning to identify something toxic online, using evasion attack would make it even easier to escape the system. And misuse. So this is examples of misuse, which use a hybrid set of attacks, and sometimes low-tech attacks, as we'll discuss here. So this was from our book 2019. So these are two ads that were both. Those are Facebook ads, both by the Internet Research Agency. So who knows the Internet Research Agency? I can see the room. So who in the room knew the Internet Research Agency? So this was so who know this guy on the right? Okay, perfect. So this is Evgeny Prigozhin, the one of the leading figures in the Russian hybrid warfare. Internet Research Agency was an agency that tried to influence social media using trolling activity. So it's a bit more harmful than just trolling. So and in 2017, so during the US elections, For example, so this is just one set of examples we have from this report of the House in the United States. So both ads, so that was during, so those were like targeting the Black Lives Matter movement. The ad on the left, I don't know if it's zoom in. The ad on the left is a patriotic ad, and the ad on the right is an anti. So it's a pro Black Lives Matter ad. So the one on the left is defending the police and attacking the Black Lives Matter movement. The one on the right is attacking the police, and this it's actually both of them are as you notice some sort of straw man argument on both sides. But the funny thing is, like, the sad thing is that both ads were bought from the same IP address in St. Petersburg. And the goal of both ads, and there was like thousands of examples like that, is to divide the society as much as possible. So to make the left side of the ad attract the right wing side of the opinion, and then the right ad attract the left side wing of the opinion, and then polarize them as much as possible. And even more interesting, as I said, this is a bit of a low-tech attack. They used a vulnerability in Facebook algorithm, which is that the more engaging is your ad, the less you pay. So the more polarizing is your ad, the more it attracts one particular side and gets a lot of clicks, the less you pay for your ads. So during all these campaigns, so during the 2017 campaign, Clinton and Trump paid about $80 million of ads each, and the Russians paid only $49,000 for these ads, because the cost was inversely proportional to as I said, to the engagement. So this is an example of misuse, and when you know the vulnerabilities of the algorithm, you can do a lot of things. So that's what actually happened, at least since 2016. And nobody is an angel in this space of misinformation. So here you have also the French. You also have examples of the Americans, and people tend to forget that Cambridge Analytica was a company that worked for the American army and the British army during the invasion of Iraq. So which is a bit ironic, since Cambridge Analytica is what was most helpful to the Russians in 2016. So here you have also like other cases of examples of misuse. There's this book by Lengyan Hong and myself in 2019 that talks about this. It talks also about the alignment problem and more concrete cases of misuse. So let's get back to these three families of attacks. As I said, I will be more on the poisoning side for the rest of the talk. So we are interested in adversaries who are injecting malicious data to harm, bias, and backdoor the model. So this can be done through data, but it's also, so if you take the distributed setting point of view, you can also be interested in adversaries that have access to maybe some of the machines. So if you are training the model in a distributed fashion, if you are doing machine learning on device or something like that, you might also be interested in what we call in distributed computing the Byzantine fault tolerance model, where you want a distributed system to work despite the presence of adversaries among the nodes. And so as you can guess, for poisoning, so the first level is having access, just you are allowed to inject some data. Second level, you will be allowed to access or control some of the machines. And the highest level of attack is what we call the single point of failure. So if the system is distributed, but it has a central server, so it's not decentralized, the worst case would be having access to the single point of failure, where the attacker has access to the central authority of the training system, and maybe undetectably doing the same job that it was trying to do before. So language models are infected. I don't think you need this slide in 2024, and then neither this slide. And so let's maybe just skip again to skip to the last slide, and I will repeat it a lot. Recommendation algorithms are already endangering human societies. We tend to forget that 3 years ago we were in the midst of a pandemic, and across YouTube, not necessarily the best content. So the worst content was trending, and according to the chief product officer of YouTube, most views, so at least 70% of the views, come from recommendations, not from active choice. So the algorithm we put, so which is machine learning based, that suggests content to people, has more influence than the choice or the free will, or call it what you want, of the users. So the consequences of these algorithms are very important, and we tend to forget this use case. And I will conclude with this part with this slide, that if you're not convinced, large scale repeated exposure works. Really, it works very well, as a lot of propagandists understood it well before. So let's get a bit technical. So in this section, I will present some. Yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
There is a question.
Yes. Yeah, I just had a question. So when you mentioned data poisoning for you, like, is troll like data poisoning, or?
Yes. So that's yeah. Thanks for the question, because it doesn't seem obvious, but I don't necessarily have a slide for that. But yeah, let's say when I am maybe I'll just maybe take the freedom to not use the order of the slides. I'll give you an example of data poisoning in the form of trolling. So in this slide, so you can focus on the central image. This is the account of Amnesty International in Morocco. So in 2020, 2021, the Moroccan regime used a lot of accounts to go to Twitter and report Amnesty International as a malicious, as an account that promotes violence. So when you do that, you're giving a label to the algorithm. So the Twitter algorithm is seeking data on every account. So if I report you for promoting violence, and if we are enough reporting you for promoting violence, the algorithm learns what actually the poisoners led it to think about these accounts. And you can argue that this is a form of poisoning, because I do not think that Amnesty International promotes violence or terrorism. It's a human rights organization, and yet Twitter like restricted it. So this is from 2021. Other accounts are also human rights defense accounts, and so this is a case of poisoning inside that is happening in real time in social media. So does this answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Sorry?
Thank you. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. So let's start the technical section of this talk. Sorry. Oops. Voilà. So we were here. So let's start the technical part of this talk and discuss a bit the positive results that our research has brought since 2017 or 18. So let's look at this setup. So you have some model with the weights WT, and sorry, you have some data points or users or machines. So and you're doing SGD. So a good user is someone that is using good data, whatever that means. So just the label is not like there is no mislabeling. A 1 is a 1. So if you are doing MNIST, then just like the numbers are not mislabeled or not adversarially mislabeled. So a good user would be someone such that the expected value of the estimator of the gradient is equal to the real nabla of f. So f is the loss function. So you have some model WT. You are using these estimates of the gradients from some data points or machines. and then you're updating the model using a sum or a weighted sum, so the average gradient. So what happens is that so gradient descent, as you all know, you decrease the model error by using useful data. So you have some schematic view where you're using like minus nabla. Nabla would be this blue arrow. The black arrows would be honest user. There are stochastic estimates of nabla, but on expectation, they are equal to nabla. So can we provably guarantee that adversaries cannot harm or bias or backdoor the model? Yes. So one of our earliest results were positive results, actually. Of course, under some conditions, and it's all it's all about these conditions. So secure cases where you can do this. So let's first discuss why averaging the gradients is not secure. So as you might have guessed, if I have some malicious user, maybe the estimates of the gradients that they are sending me looks like something like this this red arrow. It's clearly not useful to estimate the blue arrow of which is minus nabla. And if I'm taking the average of all the gradients, and if the red arrow is very large, or using the high dimensional space hiding somewhere in a direction where none of the honest workers are sending me gradients, then I will be fooled, and the average gradient will be influenced by this malicious user. So there was this paper in 2017, machine learning with adversaries. Sorry?
There is a question in the chat.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, okay, I'm just changing the tab to look at the chat. Can you please okay, harm in this context. So yeah, let's now be very formal. Harm would be a gradient that does not satisfy this property. So here you have a loss function, okay, and a honest user draws. So you have machines drawing data points, doing stochastic gradient descent. So they draw data points such that the expected value of their gradient estimator is equal to nabla of the loss function. So I'm not discussing whether the loss function captures. So of course, like here, I'm hiding everything else under the loss function. I'm assuming that the loss function is aligned with what we want. I'm assuming that there was a consensus on what is the best proxy to the objective we want to optimize, etc. So this is not about this kind of questions, which I'm just hiding some. So I'm not tackling this kind of question. So here, I'm assuming that we have a good proxy for what we want. So let's say we are doing MNIST. So a 1 is a 1, a 2 is a 2. So we have some loss function f that is consensual. And thank you for a question, because at the end of the talk we'll discuss this, because if f is not consensual, then everything here is flawed. So okay, so let's go back. So the harm, so as I said, would be not being an unbiased estimator of the gradients, so which would be the case of this red arrow here. And as we proved in this paper in 2017, and sorry, yeah. So let's first discuss the positive. So these positive results, and then we noticed already in 2018 is that in high dimension, an adversary can build on the loss function's non-convexity to make SGD converge to ineffective models. So I will discuss a bit these two results very briefly. So these two are, so if you want more details, you can look at Sebastian's PhD thesis 2022 or my PhD thesis in 2020. Sebastian's thesis will be more about implementations, so all the codes and practical implementations will be found there. My thesis is more about the algorithms and the theory and the formalisms behind that. So I point you to these two theses if you want more technical details. So these algorithms. So we were very happy back then. We got ACM reproducibility badges for our claims, because as you might know, machine learning is going under was at least in 2018 going through an reproducibility crisis. So we're very happy for reproducing our results by others, etc. But as we see, this is all very good, positive results, but useful in low dimension. So low dimension, I say here, is 10 to the power 5 parameters. So doing some MNIST or some CFAR10 with 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 7 parameters, yes, all our claims are pretty much fine. As soon as the model grows, the devil is in the details, as we will see here. So before I go to the impossibility results, let's first discuss the positive results. So what would be the alternative here to averaging the gradients?
Picking the median instead of the mean.
Excellent. So that was more or less what we said back then. So instead of taking the average gradient, we have to stop all what we do, and everyone around the world should stop doing average gradients and start taking the median gradient. And of course, in high dimension, you have, right?
Nothing.
Okay, so and in high dimension, of course, you have a lot of options. You have the coordinate-wise median, you have the geometric median. So the number of medians you can come up with is very large. Every one of them has some advantages, disadvantages. This is not the topic here, but all of them. So if you did some robust statistics or high dimensional statistics, all of them would have a big caveat called square root of the dimension. So, or something like that, square root of the trace of the covariance matrix, which is just another way to say square root of the effective dimension. So as we will see very quickly, this is the devil. The devil is in these details. Is that in very high dimension, robust statistics. So the robust statistics toolbox offer an alternative to the average, but it is as good as square root of the dimension, or something that behaves like square root of the dimension. Okay, so back then, so we brought these positive results. We showed that SGD with a median, SGD, so with an algorithm called CRUM that I'm mentioning here. So CRUM and Boolean are some of our two algorithms back then. So CRUM behaves like a geometric median. So the geometric median is just another way of doing the median. Instead of doing the median coordinate-wise, you have some loss function, and you look at a vector that minimizes this loss function, which is, for example, the sum of the distances between between the minimizer and all the vectors that are involved. So in this case, the sum of the distances between x and the proposed gradients from all the data points or all the workers if you are doing a distributed setting. And so these positive results were reproducible, but now with today's models, I would not advocate for so of course they're always better than averaging the gradients, but they are not bulletproof security solutions. So now can we formalize the question a bit broader and seek something like a lower bound? So is there a lower bound on security? Is there a lower bound below which we cannot go? So is there at least some harm that will always exist, or some error that will always exist? And people from robust statistics already know the answer. And yes, there is an answer in robust statistics when estimating the mean. So can we have some security theorem that says that there exists an algorithm for every instance, for every attack, the algorithm on the instance, despite the attack, would be safe enough? And so this is very informal. So if we seek an impossible security theorem, so can we have a theorem that says something like, for every algorithm there exists an instance and there exists an attack, such that the algorithm on the instance, because of the attack, is too dangerous. So in the case of learning, the first statement would be something like, is there a learning procedure such that for every data coming from honest users, and again, taking Leka's question, so honest users would be users providing unbiased estimators of the gradients, not going into the social part of it. So for every data from honest users, so unbiased estimators of the gradient. For every data from adversaries, so those are who are not abiding by the rule, which is trying to estimate the real nabla. The learning procedure on the data of honest people, or honest workers, or honest data points, honest machines, despite the attack from the adversary, is safe enough. On the impossibility results, you can guess it. You just change the statement. So what we did actually, before presenting what we did, some talking about a bit briefly about here is a result. So not from me, this is from Lei and Sadegh and others. There is actually an equivalence between poisoning and Byzantine attacks. So as I mentioned before, you can be worried about like data poisoning, people injecting data points. You can also be worried about non-reliable machines in a distributed settings. There are equivalence between the two. So there's this result in ICML 2022 in the convex setting. And Wasim Bouaziz, the PhD student I mentioned early on, has provided a result that is under review in the general case with neural nets. So not necessarily in a convex setting. So what we did, so now going back to what we actually did, in 2021, we had this result in NeurApes saying that actually there is an equivalence between secure collaborative learning and secure averaging. Okay, so actually, so C being a constant, so up to a constant, secure collaborative learning can be solved if and only if C secure averaging can be solved. And so let's present the setup. So there is so each honest user has a data dependent local loss. Honest users aim to minimize their cumulative loss. So the cumulative loss will be by definition the sum of these honest loss. And again, thank you, Leka, for insisting on this. What is harm in this context? So just trying to minimize the loss. So these honest users are trying to minimize the cumulative loss, but they're attacked by malicious users who are a priori indistinguishable from honest users. So if we do not learn, so this learn procedure that applies to the cumulative loss, this with the presence of Byzantine nodes, the learned model when attacked by the Byzantine nodes. Okay, so the informal theorem says that there is an algorithm that guarantees that for every LH and every attack, so Biz would be the Byzantine nodes, so the attackers, the norm of the norm of the gradient that will be achieved, so that will be reached by the learning procedure, despite the presence of the attackers, would be upper bounded by a constant C times the heterogeneity of the losses. Okay. So if we seek this kind of results, which is what we seek in collaborative learning, then there would be a learn procedure that guarantees this, if and only if there is an algorithm averaging that guarantees that for every x belonging to RD to the power h, the number of honest users, for every Byzantine attackers, the empirical average, so this is the empirical average of the honest users minus the average on the proposed vectors, despite the Byzantine vectors, would be upper bounded by C, the same constant, times the diameter of the set of honest vectors. So here we go to a more simple problem that is very well known in robust. Any comment about, sorry, I'm jumping to the chat. I see some people.
Yeah, there is a question.
Sorry. So any comment about, so can you repeat what is, okay. So, okay, so let's go first through to the, so unicity is coming from Leka. So are you talking about the unicity of what? Of the algorithm that exists? Leka is writing. Yes, okay. So so here we are not tackling the unicity question. So we're just saying that this existence is equivalent to this existence. It was not the topic, but as you might have guessed, it's obviously not unique, because you can do robust estimation of the mean with a median. You can do it with the coordinate-wise median. You can do it with trimmed mean. You can do it with some caveats. You can do it with the geometric median. You can do it with 2K, etc. So so unicity is not the question here. The question here is the equivalence between the existence of a solution to this problem and a solution to this second problem. And Quentin, can you repeat what is heterogeneity? Yeah, excellent. So this will appear a bit less informally later. Heterogeneity is it encompasses a lot of issues between the data. So very informally, heterogeneity is everything else but IID. So when you have IID data, you'd have, for example, if you go back to this unbiased estimator of the gradients, when you have IID data from honest users, so again, like not mislabeled unbiased estimators of the gradients, the expected value or like the distances between all these values, so they will have some like properties that fall under the IID assumption. Okay, so like Quentin is raising his hand. So are you okay? So do you want me to still go to?
I think yeah, it's good for me. Like it's some kind of measure of non-IIDness.
Exactly. So for example, it could be like the spread of the propositions, the spread of the vectors, the diameter. So think of the diameter, for example, or the variance if they're like if you have some empirical variance. And it's a good question because this is where square root d will also appear. So heterogeneity brings you square root d, typically. Typically, it's like the diagonal in a high dimensional space. So this is the thing where you have this spread, or like okay. So let's be a bit more formal. It would be square root the covariance matrix. Square root of the trace of the covariance matrix.
Okay, thank you.
You know, like you have some high dimensional data, their real dimension is the square root of the trace of the covariance matrix. Okay. So yeah, so what we have as a result is this equivalence. So we're like okay, 40 minutes. That tells you basically heterogeneity is a security killer, because this is where you will have hard time achieving a robust estimate of the mean, and because of the equivalence, you will have hard time achieving a robust collaborative learning results, or vice versa. So this is the more specific statements, is that if you have F malicious workers among the group of workers, and H honest workers, so no algorithm can guarantee that and for every X, for every attack, the empirical average of the honest minus the average achieved by this averaging algorithm. So think of this averaging algorithm as like a robust estimator of the mean. So for example, a median. This will be at most, so this will be upper, so this would be upper bounded by F divided by 2H times the diameter. So here we come to your question about heterogeneity, diameter of all the honest propositions. So the more heterogeneous are the propositions, the harder it is to estimate their mean. Now, because of the equivalence, you would have a similar results on the loss in collaborative learning that grows like the heterogeneity of the losses. So when you have this equivalence, so now you have some pretty bad news, because so coming back to Quentin's question on heterogeneity, whenever you find a satisfying definition of heterogeneity, you realize that it grows at least like square root of the dimension. Okay. So as I said, it's typically square root the trace of something like the square root of the trace of the covariance, or something that encompasses the high dimensional, say the square root of the second order moment. So something, whenever you take the physics point of view of it, it has the, if you think as a physicist, you know, whether it is kilogram or Newton or meters, etc., you realize it's something like square root. Okay. So then, because of this, then the harm, so the error that you will achieve will grow like square root d times f divided by h. So that's like the starting point. So this lower, like these results were the starting point of our claims that we summarized in this. So so you have this. So yeah, this is the paper that has the equivalence, but then you have a summary of all the arguments for impossibility in this preprint. That is somewhere in an archive that tells you that like large number of parameters and heterogeneity of data make a compelling case for impossible security in several real-world situations. And in this paper, so I did not discuss this in the talk, but in this paper, we also review some of the literature in privacy to show how the high-dimensional arguments for poisoning have some analogies with the arguments regarding the privacy. Let's just like go back to some details. So now that we have this this in mind, as I said, of course, if you have a single point of failure, that's a bit worse. So you can decentralize as a security measure, but yeah. So maybe let's start concluding, and then as I said, Leka's question and other questions would be very useful now, because all of what I said has one big assumption, which is that so we know what is a honest worker. Okay, so we agreed on some loss function that is satisfying. So assuming we are in a setting where we control what it means to have a good loss function, okay, assuming that the malicious workers are the minority, so less than 50%, okay, so less than 50% malicious workers, we have a good loss function that we agreed on collaboratively. So we agree on what good means, which is obviously not something trivial, maybe impossible. Even in this very toy example, we would have a square root d problem. So if you have a model of 10 to the power 14 parameters, square root of 10 to the power 14 is 10 to the power 7. So we'll have errors that grow like 10 to the power 7. Okay. Now in the real world, so I'm coming back to the motivations of this kind of research. If you look at, for example, Chinese influence operate, this is a report from the French military. The French military reports that the number of trolls that the Chinese military was leveraging on social media is 20 million people working part-time and 2 million people working full-time. So on some topics on the internet, the attackers are the majority. So all what I presented here is like the positive results and the negative results rely on some flawed assumption that we are learning some loss function that we know is good. We have some honest users that we know are providing useful gradients, and they are the majority. And unfortunately, and in real life, it's not the case. It's not the case because so if in social media, the majority is not necessarily honest. Okay, and so when I was doing my PhD and going to ICML or NeurIPS, people will tell me, "Oh, you're assuming up to 50% of attackers. That is not realistic at all. Malicious machines are less than 0 point something of the machines at Amazon or Google." So actually, you should not think of malicious users as a malicious machine. You have to think of now in terms of social, like anything that generates gradients, any unit that so in an upcoming paper we talk about gradient generation units. So anything that generates gradients, any behavior on the internet today generates gradients. When you provide some texts online, you are generating gradients. When you comment, you like, you dislike, when you report something as violent, you are generating gradients. So arguably, this honest majority assumptions is not realistic. So that's even like that's adding another layer of impossibility for safety that I did not discuss. some maybe takeaways, and maybe I will just wrap up and let you have questions. Is that so some of the solutions you have to think of is that data must be signed and traceable. So most of data poisoning research fails to leverage structuring data sets to increase security. So some of the solutions that are maybe the most promising is to at least work with trace data. So this is not something you see across the industries. People just have this tendency to scrap all the web and use everything they have under their hand, because the model is very large and they need a lot of data. So we have this myth of ground truths, and thanks again, Leka, for the question. So so when you do a machine learning class, you do a machine learning class with MNIST on mind. With MNIST on mind, we know what is a honest user. A honest user is a user that is labeling a 1 as a 1 and the 7 as a 7 and then 8 as an 8. Okay. So that's the textbook case of machine learning. The textbook case of machine learning has that's the problem. We have MNIST in mind, is that there is something called honest user, there is something called honest label, etc. But when we think of the most impactful machine learning applications today, language, recommendations, targeting, they have no ground truth. So there's no ground truth. There's no honest definition of what is the honest behavior. And so Leka's question was not provocative at all. It's actually the heart of the conclusion. It says is that all what we said about the hardness of impossibility applies to textbook machine learning. Okay, so even for textbook machine learning, having very large models is unsafe. So for beyond the textbook machine, so what's like, let's just discuss, for example, language. So for language, ground truth, you might tell me, okay, the ground truth for language is the most frequent word that comes after the previous one, right? That's what is used today to train ChatGPT or Gemini or most LLMs. In the paper I mentioned before, so this one on the impossible safety of large AI models, we bring the example of language, and so one of the solutions people said, okay, let's maybe not use internet forums, let's use expertise, let's use textbooks and academic books. I don't know if you know the DSM. The DSM is it's like the main the Bible. It's like the diagnostics and statistics. Sorry, the correct abbreviation. So the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So if you know this book, for up to the version, sorry. So up to 1974, so up to the version of 1974 of this book, which is like the Bible of psychiatry, homosexuality was listed as a disease. So if you train an LLM on psychiatry books, and if your psychiatry books have a lot of books before 1974, the most likely word after homosexuality might be a disease. So is this ground truth? So is this a correct labeling? So again, like when you do your machine learning classes, either as a teacher in the room or as a student, some of you are both PhD students. So PhD students, you tend to be both. You have MNIST in mind. So you have this idea that there is some correct labeling. Then a correct worker would be an unbiased estimator of the gradients. Okay, so if I'm drawing data IID from MNIST, the expected value of the gradient estimator is equal to nabla. Okay, that is not the case with text, because we don't have a correct labeling of text. We don't have a correct labeling of recommendations. Okay, so recommendation systems today, like most companies that fund our conferences, ICML, NeurIPS, etc., they are social media. This is where they make a lot of money. They make a lot of money by serving ads on social media. So it's mostly these two, which boils like more or less to the same toolbox of recommendations. These do not have a ground truth. So that's the other problem we have. So instead, we should securely search for scientific and moral consensus and compromises. So not reinvent the wheel. So those are things that society has done over decades, if not millennia. So one of the challenges we have today is how to implement things like consensus, compromises, expertise. I'm not mentioning expertise in the slide, but that's something important. So remember, the majority is honest, the minority is not honest. When you think of something that requires expertise, the correct labeling is not coming from the majority. If we take society as a whole, we are not experts in heart attacks. Okay, so if we are talking about heart attacks on social media, I hope the algorithm is not taking our opinions as like the honest labeling or like the majority labeling, but instead it's maybe given more weight to expertise from actual medical literature on heart attacks. So we have to seek things like compromises, consensus, and I'm forgetting it in the slides, expertise. And yeah, I mentioned this use case of poisoning. So the consequences of poisoning today are very real. On the left, you have the wife of a journalist that is jailed in Morocco. In the center, you have Amnesty International in Morocco. So I come from a country that practices poisoning on a daily basis. So poisoning is something I live with as a Moroccan, and the consequences today is that you cannot. So as an organization such as Amnesty International, you cannot even reach to the public opinion because you are restricted on social media because of the poisoning that is happening by, in this case, a majority of accounts. Because who cares about Amnesty International? Only like human rights defenders and the regime. And if the regime controls the majority of accounts on Twitter, then on this topic, on this subtopic, then the poisoning is done by the majority. So and something like maybe you can take away is also that you have to look at learning if you want to secure machine learning as deployed in social media. You have to think of learning as a vote. Okay, so actually the most consequential voting system today we have is social media. So we vote, we tend to like, dislike. Again, I'm bringing my personal experience here again, is that as a Moroccan, I cannot vote, for example, for my head of states. There's no elections for the king. So my only way of voting is to dislike the speeches of the king, for example. So that's a vote. So you have to think of social media as a voting machine. And fortunately, we have a mathematical toolbox for voting systems. There's a lot of literature on voting systems. I did not go through the details, but so for example, we have this paper in AI Stats 2023 on the strategy proveness of the geometric median. So some of you suggested the median of the geometric median as an alternative to the mean. So with some colleagues, we also look at it as a voting part of collaborative learning. And if you have done some social choice theory, there are questions such as strategy proveness. So that this kind of social choice theory care about, and you might wonder whether we are incorporating reliable aspects of voting systems into how we aggregate gradients, and or also aspects like one person, one unit force, one person, one vote. So you have this concept of one force, one person, one vote in democracies. So in this paper, we argue for something called one person, one unit force. So because when you have this loss function of sum of distances, so remember the average is the minimizer of sum of square distances. So the gradient of the participation is 2 times the vector. So it can be, so if you have some malicious worker pulling you very far away, the pulling force will be proportional to the attack. When you do the geometric median, so you remove the square, and as you know, the gradient of the norm without a square is unitary. So it's equal to the vector divided by the norm. So it's a unitary vector. So those are questions that are outside the scope of the talk. Yeah, I'll just conclude by this, that we have to revisit these are conclusions I mostly share with my co-author Lengyan Hong. He has been very active, way more active than me in promoting them. So this is the most widespread assumption in machine learning. Assume IID data. So assume that assume that like the data are IID and are honestly coming from something that is correctly labeled. And also like when we do this minimizing, like we minimize the data fit in loss. Here we are not politically neutral when we do that. So most of machine learning is about this data fitting. So do you want to do data fitting to textbooks where homosexuality is a disease? So do you want to do data fitting to forums where Africans like myself are not considered humans? So I'm not sure that this is neutral. So we have this problem also with neutrality. So we think that there is some sort of neutrality in machine learning. There isn't. When you choose a loss function, you are not neutral. So the first moment you choose a loss function, you are doing a social choice. The moment you choose an aggregation function, you are doing a social choice. Mathematicians call this social choice theory for a good reason. The moment you choose to minimize the sum of squared distances instead of the sum of distances, you are doing a social choice, because the sum of squared distances in a loss would be less robust to attacks, but more inclusive maybe to expertise. Okay, the non-squared sum of distances would be more robust to attacks, but would be less inclusive to expertise, to a minority. So think of whenever you choose a loss function, whenever you choose an aggregation function, you are doing a social choice. Think about that, please. And yeah, we have this mindset is that yeah, we if we empirically find that our system is robust. So if you talk to people doing computer security, robustness is never illustrated empirically. It's proved mathematically, which is very, very, very hard for machine learning. So if you do empirical research, that could show that something is not robust, but it can never prove that something is robust. And yeah, other things, I think there are yeah, maybe just only this one. Today, having speed limits for driving cars is something very consensual. So nobody discusses the fact that you have speed limits for cars, except maybe in Germany. But the day you would have cars that run in 10,000 kilometers per hour, I think Germany will revisit its highway laws. So we have to think of equivalence for this. I know that in the room you had Joshua, who was advocating also for a pause. One of the so many times people outside our community ask us what would be the equivalent of a speed limit. So in this talk, one of the speed limits we discussed was the number of parameters. So the number of parameters today is a problem. So we have to urgently think about ways to socially limit the number of parameters to just the necessary, to come up with new ways of maybe distillation. So solutions that would overcome this problem coming from the high dimensionality of the model. There are other issues that could be limited. So what do we optimize for, the loss function, and things like that, how many data we collect, etc. And yeah, the wisdom is always coming from the best of us. Alan Turing always said that if a machine is expected to be infallible, it cannot also be intelligent. So secure. So yeah. So today we reach a point where this kind of talks, so this kind of issues we discuss, are not anymore confined to a small subset of researchers in machine learning. Society overall wants to hear from us, wants recommendations for regulation, etc. And it's a bit frightening to see some of us still promoting the perpetual motion machine of machine learning, which is some sort of AI that could be totally safe while also being perfectly totally safe while having no limitation on either its speed or its size or the number of data it can collect, etc. So we have to come up with consensual equivalences of the speed limit that is very consensual today. And yeah, I will take questions. I will look at the chat if there is some question in the chat that I forgot.
First of all, let's thank Mahdi for the
So yes, so as mentioned, Mahdi, it's time for questions. So either people can write or directly talk.
I think we have some question in the chat.
Yes.
Can you can also see the questions.
Thanks, Joshua. Alors. Okay, so Quentin, yeah, Quentin, the heterogeneity question was addressed. Does this mean that no matter the averaging method, you can find an attack which will break it? Yes, yes. So if the model, if we live in a high-dimensional space, and also, yeah, I have we have an answer here in 2018 in this paper. So if you look at this paper, you even have the code for the attack. So this paper, actually this paper starts by providing an attack for this paper. so yeah, it's very handy when you attack yourself. But yeah, since then a lot of people provided attacks for our algorithms, and their attacks make sense. And every time there is a defense mechanism, you can always so maybe something I can explain with my fingers. Think of so imagine you have two honest workers go into this direction, okay? And they live in the same plane, okay? They live in the same plane. Maybe I can choose. I think I have some extra slides for you for this. If I have an extra slide here, no. So yeah, I will use. Sorry, I will use my fingers instead of extra slides. but you have the details, and even so you have even better attacks. So you have, for example, Baruch 2019, a little is enough. So in addition to this, the hidden vulnerability, I'm putting the titles in the chat.
Thanks.
So these were these were in 2019 and 2018 attacks. So I'm explaining, as I will explain the hidden vulnerability one. It's just like if you have honest users living in some hyperplane or like some subspace. So they have some disagreements maybe in this line, but they mostly live in a hyperplane. Maybe they agree. There's one dimension when they mostly agree, and then they have some legitimate disagreements across other dimensions. So as an attacker, so if the aggregator is the geometric median, for example, as an attacker, you can use this legitimate disagreement across the hyperplane and inject it towards the direction where they agree. You will still be closer to the geometric median. Okay? Okay, you will still be closer to the geometric median, but then you can tell me, okay, but this does not attack the coordinate-wise median. You can have other attacks for coordinate-wise median. You can have attacks. So you say, okay, maybe let's use the infinite norm. You can do so in the hidden vulnerability. We discussed which you can do. So if you are using the LP norm, like the Euclidean norm or any LP norm, you will use these disagreements across across the honest workers and inject it in coordinates where you have the most agreement among the honest workers, and you will still be, so you have a budget of square root d times sigma being the coordinate wise amount of disagreements between the honest workers. Okay, you will have a budget of sigma times square root d to inject. In the infinite norm, we explain it in the paper. It's just an analog. It's like the opposite way of reasoning about the attack. Alors, Leka, okay. Leka, is there a proof? So let's start maybe like the last one. The word is not bias free. Why should we expect systems to be? Very good questions. We will not expect them to be bias free. But again, society has already solved part of the question, which is consensus, international law, conventions, expertise. So what we do is we reduce. So there are things we cannot agree on, and that's fine. But let's at least find areas of consensus and agree on these areas. And you will be surprised by the amount of areas of agreements that we are overlooking. So I'm not calling for a bias-free machine learning. It's impossible. So maybe I guess we all agree that every human being is a human. So that's maybe something very consensual. So let's at least like my I'm not asking a lot from machine learning models. I'm just asking them to assume that every human being is a human being. So the entry level is very low for agreements. Is there a proof showing that voting leads to equilibrium? So I'm not a social choice expert. So I use social choice theory and voting systems as a toolbox, not as a. So I use it. I don't advance the research on voting systems. So maybe that's a question to ask someone who is more expert in game theory, Nash equilibria, etc. It's not clear why does not exist an LLM's answer that could not be considered. Sorry, not clear why does not exist an LLM answer that could not be considered safe. But there is a non-gradient. Okay. Could you repeat the question on gradient-based word so that I answer? Maybe you can switch on your mic if you need. Okay. You assume gradient based. Yes. So yes, I'm assuming across all this talk, I'm assuming differentiable models. So I'm assuming models that are trained on something that is derived from a gradient, which is arguably the workhorse of most of today's ML deployments. And obviously LLMs fall under this category. So LLMs are trained with Adam, with SGD, with variants of both, with sin SGD, so you have some differentiation at some point, or form of gradient.
Can you hear us correctly?
Yes.
So maybe I can ask you a question in the meantime. So basically, you're saying that the data used in like this machine learning algorithm are poisoned. And I don't know, have you seen like Nicola Carlini's talk where it's saying basically you can poison, for instance, like any data set, Lion's data set, for instance. And it reminded me because he was saying at some point that we might need to like basically we're talking about votes, putting weights on users at some point. I don't know if you like, I guess you thought about this kind of.
So I did not see the talk. Maybe the talk in your YouTube channel.
No, not on our YouTube channel, but it's a talk like basically. So Nicola Carlini was saying that you can buy the Lion datasets, basically, and so you can poison it on purpose.
I think I'm familiar. So I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but I've seen a group of researchers who could not only poison the data sets, but like they could change, like use some domain names they could buy and then change the change the content of the domain name. Yes.
Exactly.
So we're talking about the same thing. Huh?
Exactly, we're talking about the same thing. So basically, for me, the situation is the same. That basically you have data which is poisoned. And basically, the only way to deal with it would be to like put some weight to each user, like some confidence or like stuff. And I guess you thought about that. I mean, I guess it's raising a lot of ethical questions, but I don't know. Did you Well,
So
you work on this, so
I think some of the people who work the most now on this are, for example, the NGO Tournesol. I don't know if you're
okay.
familiar with Tournesol.
Quickly, like,
Tournesol.app.
okay.
So it's a non-profit led by Lê Nguyen Hong. I used to help them in the beginning, so I'm not very involved with them anymore, unfortunately, but I will try to. So and they taught a lot about this question of how to incorporate trusts. So how to have a mix of expertise and democracy. So because you want to listen to everyone, but then you want to upweight some participants compared to others. And it's not as trivial as putting weights. It's really not as trivial as putting weights. And again, I think the questions we find in most machine learning papers are still rich word. So when I tell you about like, so in like when you think, as soon as you bring the discussion to social media and you think of social media as the most consequential deployments of machine learning today, and as soon as you have these orders of magnitude of 2 million Chinese trolls full-time, 100,000 Moroccan trolls full-time working for the regime, and then you have a gradient-based algorithm updating the social networks and maybe muting journalists, muting human rights organizations, and then promoting maybe calls for war, calls for violence. So again, like we have issues that appear in machine learning papers, but compared to real life issues, they are still like first world problems. So the solution to maybe data such as Lion, etc., you can have signatures, you can have web of trust, for example, of signatures. I don't know if you're familiar with the web of trust for PGP. So if you sign your emails, you can have a web of people signing the signatures or signing the keys. The private, we have a private public key. So if you're familiar with encryption, and then you can use these keys to sign. So I can sign Luca, and then Luca can sign Joshua, and Joshua sign, and then I trust Joshua because Luca trusts Joshua, etc. So you can incorporate these kind of things to data sets as well. It's again like compared to what we have today in real time as we talk on social media, the situation is yeah, the issues we have in our papers is still cute. And again, like I let you look at Tournesol because they thought about the problem more than me for the past 3 years.
Excellent. And I had another question. So basically, we are mentioning that so basically language models, like any kind of models trained on like web scrapped data or just scrapped data might contain like hate speech or like, as you were saying, like harmful content. And I was saying like, again, we will never be able to remove all the harmful content from like the data, you know, like either from the internet or from old books. So maybe we should like find a solution on how to post-process it or like trying to remove this hate speech mode or something like this. So I don't know if you have any opinion on this.
Again, yeah, as students, so as we are all students of machine learning. Machine learning does not come for free. You have to have some ground truth to train on. So be aware. So be careful with the circular solutions or like perpetual motion solutions. So to solve this and have some post-processing or like pre-processing of the data, we have to have some ground truth. So you see where the problem is. So we have to first have some ground truth. And today, sorry?
When you say we must have, I mean, I don't know if points are like hate speech on internet, like it's ground truth. I don't know how to say it. It's in the data, it's there, but maybe you can find a way to like remove specific like mode of the data distribution. It's kind of stuff like, I don't know how to say it. It's not because it's the ground truth that we want to fill in or not.
Of course, and again, like people worked on this, so people who worked more than me on this realized how hard it is, because once you do it, you start realizing you have a lot of false positives, false negatives, and then I can game the system. So I'll give you another example. So the United Arab Emirates, so which is a regime that is not very respectful of human rights. It is very also advanced in hacking social media and attacking social media. And one of the ways is recently, so it's heavily involved in a current civil war in Sudan. So the United Arab Emirates funds and arms parts of the members of the conflicts in Sudan, which is a worst, like it's currently one of the worst humanitarian situation in the world. And people who talk about the United Arab Emirates involvement in the civil war gets banned on social media, and the social media companies told them, you were banned for hate speech against people from United Arab Emirates.
I see.
You see the so that's the thing. If you implement this kind of like solutionist approaches, then you will be gamed. So you have a regime. So the regime of the United Arab Emirates gets people censored, and the motive of being censored is hate speech against United Arab Emirates, and or like hate speech against people from the Middle East. So that's like the official justification for suspension that some of the people got. So again, like it's a very tricky question. It's not very easy question. And just like keep in mind, maybe after this talk, we do machine learning for MNIST. So we have an MNIST mindset. We have MNIST textbooks. We have MNIST theories where everything is IID, and most of the data is honestly labeled. And we have today society asking us for solutions while we were not prepared for this kind of situations. So again, like I'm unfortunately telling you I don't have a quick answer. And what I'm noticing is that people who spent a lot of time on the question still do not have a satisfying solution. Now, on the positive side, what we can do is, again, do not reinvent the wheel. Try, for example, to finding areas of consensus is not something very hard. We just have to spend time on it. And again, like this would bring us to other questions such as regulation and international governance, etc., which are all outside the scope, unfortunately. But yeah, if we have some solutions for governance and collaborative learning, we will have areas of consensus where we will realize that yeah, we have a lot of areas of consensus that we can start by working on, and then leave the non-consensual part. So we all agree on not killing babies, let's say. So yeah, let's find some ground truth for not killing babies, and then let's collaboratively build some data. So also collaborative building of data sets is very important. And today, so we have to move from this culture of scraping data from the web to collaboratively building data sets where we sign them. So I know this data set is coming from Mila. It is signed by Mila. It was labeled by Mila, or like it's outsourced by Mila to trusted partners, etc. And then you do the same. You have some data sets from me or Corporate Technique, etc. And then this way we can build up better data sets also.